The coffee burned his palm before he even realized the mistake. He had been moving too fast, fumbling with the cup as he stepped into the precinct break room, eyes glued to the morning briefing on the cracked monitor. The low hum of fluorescent lights mingled with the distant wail of a siren outside, a rhythm that should have been ordinary, comforting even. But it wasn't today. The dog froze, a taut line of muscle and fur, ears pricked, eyes dark and steady. Rookie Officer Ryan felt the world narrowed to that gaze, and then to the warm liquid spilling across the dog's back. His heart dropped. The dog's growl was quiet at first, more a warning than a threat, but it vibrated deep in the chest like the echo of a storm. Ryan froze, fingers stiff on the edge of the counter, watching as the commanding presence of a German shepherd, regal and fierce, turned its gaze on him, unblinking, and then barked, a sharp, precise sound that seemed to cut through the fluorescent haze. And then came footsteps, long, measured, heavy, and Ryan's stomach sank into his boots. The commander had arrived. The precinct was unusually quiet for a Monday morning. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh, clinical glow across the cracked linoleum floors, bouncing off the metal filing cabinets like cold reflections of reality. Rookie Officer Ryan held a paper cup of coffee that had already grown tepid. Its aroma faint but sharp, mingling oddly with the antiseptic scent that clung to the air. He had barely slept the night before, replaying every mistake he'd ever made. And now his hands trembled just slightly, betraying the nervous energy that buzzed in his chest. He told himself it was normal, part of being new, part of surviving the first real week on the job. But the tremor in his fingers felt like a warning, a subtle tremor foreshadowing the disaster about to unfold. As he stepped into the break room, the sound of his boots echoed unnaturally loud, bouncing off the walls and into the silence like a shot. His eyes darted briefly to the cracked monitor in the corner, flickering with the morning briefing that none of the officers really paid attention to. But he, with his obsessive tendency to over-prepare, could not ignore. He shifted the cup in his hand, fumbling with the lid, and that's when it happened. A sharp jerk of his elbow, almost imperceptible to anyone else, sent the coffee leaping over the rim. It spilled slow motion, warm and sticky, across the pristine back of a German shepherd who had been standing silently near the doorway, muscles taut, ears pricked, eyes fixed on Ryan with an intensity that felt almost human. Ryan froze, heart hammering in his chest. The smell of burnt coffee mixed with wet fur, a pungent, unmistakable scent that made him gag slightly. The dog's growl was low, almost imperceptible at first, vibrating through the linoleum floor and into the soles of his boots. Ryan's mouth opened and closed and opened again, words failing him, swallowed by panic. The dog's eyes were sharp, dark, unblinking, filled with a judgment that went beyond instinct. This was no ordinary animal. This was a sentinel, a presence carved out of discipline and training. And Ryan had just violated that invisible order with the clumsiness of a rookie. The hum of fluorescent lights seemed to intensify, a static buzzing that merged with the racing of his heartbeat. The faint clatter of distant keys in the adjacent office sounded like gunshots in the quiet. Ryan's mind scrambled. Apologize. Clean it up before anyone sees, but nothing worked. He was frozen in place, fumbling with a paper towel that felt useless against the enormity of his mistake. The dog's growl grew louder, sharper, a vibration that shook his very bones. He could feel the weight of eyes on him, the unseen judgment of a creature that had been trained to sense weakness and indecision in humans, and right now, he was a masterclass in both. And then came footsteps. Long, measured, heavy steps that cut through the panic like a blade. Each tap on the linoleum drew a line between Ryan and the rest of the world. The commander, his stomach dropped as if gravity had doubled. The man walked slowly, deliberately, his coat swaying slightly, boots clicking in rhythm with the thrum in Ryan's chest. He did not rush. He did not shout. He simply appeared, and the room seemed to constrict around him, like the walls themselves were leaning in to witness Ryan's humiliation. The German shepherd remained frozen, still tense, ears forward, eyes locked on Ryan, growling just enough to punctuate the silence but not break it. Ryan swallowed hard. Words formed and dissolved in his throat. "I'm sorry I didn't." "No." That sounded weak, pathetic. He tried again, trembling. "I didn't mean," but the words seemed hollow, disappearing in the charged air between the dog and himself. The commander stopped a few feet away, hands clasped behind his back, eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in calculation. Ryan felt his knees weaken. Sweat prickled on his forehead, dampening the collar of his uniform, and the paper towel in his hands felt like a fragile shield against an unspoken verdict. Time slowed. Every sound was amplified. The drip of the coffee as it settled into the fur, the dog's low, resonant growl, the distant siren outside cutting through the silence, and the commander's steady breathing, all of it fused into a symphony of dread that Ryan felt in his chest and throat. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to curl into himself and vanish beneath the hum of fluorescent light and the smell of coffee, but he couldn't. He had been chosen for this job, thrust into the chaotic world of law enforcement, and this moment was his crucible. The dog took a step forward, slow, deliberate, almost ceremonious, and Ryan's breath caught. The growl became a bark, sharp, precise, and commanding. Ryan jumped back instinctively, nearly tipping the coffee cup entirely onto the floor, which somehow made the situation worse. The dog's eyes followed every movement, every twitch, and Ryan's stomach churned with a mixture of fear and awe. He had never seen a creature embody authority so completely, and he understood instinctively that he had crossed a boundary that few rookies even knew existed. The commander finally spoke. His voice was low, measured, heavy with the weight of experience. "Ryan," he said, and the single word carried a tremor of expectation that made Ryan's spine stiffen. "Do you know whose dog this is?" Ryan's mind raced. "Of course I know. He opened his mouth and nothing coherent came out. Words failed him in the way they only do when fear and guilt conspire against you. The dog shifted slightly, ears twitching, eyes never leaving him, as if the animal itself were judging whether he deserved mercy. Ryan felt a lump in his throat, a tension that pulled at his chest and stomach at the same time. And he knew that this was no ordinary correction. This was a reckoning, and it was coming from every angle. The commander's silent assessment, the dog's unwavering gaze, and the oppressive, fluorescent-lit atmosphere that magnified his every misstep. The room seemed to contract, the air thick with tension, and Ryan could feel the sweat on his palms as he gripped the paper towels like lifelines. The hum of the fluorescent lights became a drumbeat echoing the rapid thumping of his heart. Each second stretched impossibly long, a slow-motion parade of humiliation and fear. He wanted to apologize again, to kneel, to beg for forgiveness, but the words were heavy, stubbornly lodged in his throat. The commander simply watched, unreadable, and the dog continued its silent inquisition, a living mirror of his own nervousness, his own inadequacy. Finally, the commander exhaled a long, slow breath that seemed to carry both judgment and something else, something Ryan couldn't quite place. The German Shepherd stepped back, the taut muscles in its shoulders relaxing fractionally, though its eyes never left Ryan. The room remained still, the only movement the faint drip of coffee from the dog's fur onto the linoleum, a slow, irreversible mark of the rookie's mistake. Ryan's stomach churned, a mix of relief, dread, and raw vulnerability. He realized in that suspended moment that he had been humbled, stripped of pretense, forced to face not just the dog's authority or the commander's scrutiny, but his own fear, his own inexperience, his own raw, unpolished humanity. And as the first rays of sunlight cut through the blinds, casting thin golden stripes across the room, Ryan understood that this mistake would mark him, not as a failure, but as the beginning of something he could not yet see. The spill was more than coffee. It was a lesson in respect, patience, and the slow, deliberate work of earning trust in a world that demanded it at every turn. And he knew, deep down, that the path ahead would be long, uncertain, and painfully beautiful in its own way. The room seemed to hold its breath long after the coffee had stopped dripping. Rookie Officer Ryan stood awkwardly near the corner, paper towels crumpled in his hand, watching the German Shepherd shift its weight with a grace that felt deliberate, almost judging. Every muscle in the dog's body spoke a language Ryan didn't know how to read yet. A tension coil tightened its shoulders, the subtle flick of a tail that was not friendly, not welcoming, just precise. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed like static in his ears, and the faint scent of spilled coffee still lingered, a stubborn reminder of his mistake. He wanted to wipe it away, scrub the floor, scrub the memory, but he knew it wasn't that simple. He had crossed a boundary, and the tension in the room reflected it. He swallowed, trying to steady his breathing, but every inhale seemed too loud, too obvious. The German Shepherd's eyes never left him, wide, dark, and knowing. as if it could peer straight through his nerves and insecurities. Ryan's mind spun, imagining every possible way this could escalate. The whispered warnings from colleagues, the commander's stern reprimand, the dog's silent disapproval. He tried to apologize, voice cracking slightly, but the words felt hollow, swallowed by the charged air that hung heavy between him and the two figures representing authority and judgment. The commander remained quiet, his posture rigid but calm, like an anchor in a storm. Ryan's gaze kept flicking to him, trying to read a flicker of reaction, some hint of forgiveness. But the man's face was composed, unreadable, every inch a mask of patience mixed with authority. Ryan wanted to run, to disappear behind the lockers, to escape the weight of the German shepherd's gaze and the commander's silent evaluation, but his feet felt rooted, trapped by the realization that mistakes were visible, permanent, and sometimes public. Minutes, or maybe seconds, it was impossible to tell, passed in suffocating stillness. The dog stepped slightly forward, claws clicking softly on the linoleum, and Ryan flinched, heat rising to his cheeks. There was no aggression in the movement, but the precision made it clear that this was a test, a silent challenge he had no idea how to pass. He clenched the paper towels tighter, knuckles white, and tried to steady himself. His stomach churned, a mix of nausea and fear that left him hollow and jittery. Finally, the commander spoke, voice low, deliberate, carrying the weight of experience and authority. "Look at him," he said, gesturing subtly toward the dog without moving a muscle. Ryan's head shot up, eyes locking on the German shepherd's gaze once more. The dog didn't move or growl, didn't bark or lunge. It simply stared, unblinking, calculating. And Ryan realized with a sudden and overwhelming clarity that this wasn't about the coffee at all. It was about trust, respect. The invisible bond between those who served and those who led, between human and canine, built over years of patience, care, and shared purpose. Ryan's chest tightened. He understood instinctively that this bond couldn't be demanded, couldn't be forced with apologies or hurried gestures. It had to be earned, and in that moment, he felt the full weight of his inexperience pressing down on him. He had been so eager to prove himself, so desperate to fit in, that he hadn't stopped to consider the consequences of his actions, not just for himself, but for the living, breathing creature standing before him, aware of every nuance of his body language, every tremor in his hands, every hesitation in his movements. He took a cautious step forward, voice trembling slightly. "I didn't mean to." The words faltered. The German shepherd's ears twitched, its eyes narrowing ever so slightly, and Ryan froze. He realized painfully that he was speaking to someone, or something, that didn't respond to words alone. Actions mattered here, small gestures, calmness, patience. He could feel the dog measuring him, weighing his sincerity, and the awareness made every instinct he had scream for flight, even as a small, stubborn part of him wanted to stay, to prove he could be trusted. The commander's gaze never wavered, but Ryan could feel the weight of it, heavy and immovable. He could sense approval or disappointment hanging in the balance, but he couldn't predict which would tip. It was terrifying and yet strangely liberating. He realized he had no choice but to face it, to face the judgment and the silence, to endure the moment without flinching. He let the paper towels fall to the floor, taking a deliberate breath and letting the tension in his shoulders ease, just slightly, forcing calm where panic had held him captive. The dog's posture softened imperceptibly at first. Its ears moved, tail flicked, a subtle relaxation in the jawline, small signs almost invisible, but enough for Ryan to notice. He exhaled, a shaky but real release, understanding that this was the beginning of a tentative truce, a fragile acknowledgement that he was not wholly rejected. But the bond was far from secure, and Ryan knew each step forward from here would require patience, humility, and an understanding that trust could not be rushed. Hours, or perhaps it was only minutes later, Ryan found himself sitting on the edge of a bench in the kennel area, the German shepherd lying nearby, just far enough to maintain autonomy, but close enough that Ryan could feel the weight of its presence. Stretched between them, heavy with meaning. The rookie could hear his own heartbeat, feel the tremor in his hand subside slightly, and notice for the first time the warmth of fur under his fingers as he cautiously reached out, tentative, patient, careful not to startle. The dog didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't growl. It simply observed as if deciding whether he was worth the investment of trust. Ryan's mind wandered to the commander's words, unspoken but clear in every glance and gesture. Respect and authority were not inherited. They were earned through action, through consistency, through acknowledgement of mistakes and genuine effort to rectify them. The spilled coffee had been a mistake, but it had also been a lesson, carved sharply into memory, impossible to ignore. Ryan understood now that every decision, every small act, would be scrutinized not just by his superiors, but by those who relied on instinct and loyalty in ways humans often could not comprehend. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long golden stripes across the floor and illuminating dust motes that floated lazily in the air. The German Shepherd shifted slightly, its head resting on its paws, eyes half-lidded but still aware, alert. Ryan mirrored the movement, exhaling slowly, allowing himself a moment of quiet reflection. He realized that fear and guilt, while heavy, were only part of the story. Growth would come not from avoiding mistakes, but from facing them, from enduring the silent judgment, from proving worth through patience, courage, and humility. As the day wore on, Ryan began to understand the first lesson in earning trust: presence. He could not force the bond, could not demand acceptance, could only remain, observe, and act with integrity. The dog's stares, once intimidating and piercing, became guides, mirrors of his own progress, reflections of the patience he would need to cultivate. And though the initial panic had not fully subsided, a quiet resolve began to take root, small but undeniable. He would try again. He would learn. He would earn it. The precinct's fluorescent hum blended with distant sirens, murmured conversations, and the soft scuff of boots on linoleum. The world moved on outside this small, tense space, but inside Ryan and the German Shepherd existed in a fragile, suspended reality, a test of patience and courage that neither could ignore. And in that stillness, in the careful measurement of breaths, movements, and attention, the first tentative bridge of understanding began to form, fragile but real, between the rookie and the creature who had been wronged, and who held the power to forgive if only he proved himself worthy. Morning light filtered through the blinds of the kennel, casting stripes across the concrete floor, painting long shadows that shifted with the slow rhythm of the day. Rookie Officer Ryan arrived early, coffee forgotten on the passenger seat of his patrol car, heart still tight from yesterday's humiliation. The memory of spilled coffee, the German Shepherd's unblinking stare, and the commander's quiet but heavy gaze clung to him like a shadow he couldn't shake. Today, he told himself, he would try something different. Patience, he reminded himself. Calm. No sudden movements. No more fumbling. The dog was already there, sitting perfectly at the edge of the enclosure, ears forward, eyes alert but cautious. Its fur gleamed slightly in the soft morning sun, a living armor of discipline and instinct. Ryan took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the lesson pressing down on him. Trust was not given, it was earned. And the first step, he realized, was simply being present, simply showing consistency in a world where mistakes could happen in a heartbeat. He approached slowly, each step deliberate, careful to avoid the slightest jolt that might trigger suspicion. His hand hovered at his side before reaching toward the dog, fingers outstretched, trembling slightly with a mix of fear and anticipation. The German Shepherd watched silently, head tilted just enough to signal awareness. Tail still, a quiet sentinel waiting to see whether this human would prove patient or fumble again. Ryan knelt on one knee, low enough to seem non-threatening, and spoke softly, almost a whisper. "It's okay, I'm here. I won't hurt you." The dog shifted slightly, just enough to allow Ryan to close a small gap, his fingers brushing the warm, coarse fur. He felt a jolt of relief mixed with fear. The slightest wrong move, and the bond he hoped to build could be undone. The German Shepherd did not recoil. It simply observed, muscles tensing and relaxing in a delicate dance of trust-building. Ryan exhaled, steadying his breath, and continued with gentle strokes along the dog's shoulder, careful, deliberate, aware of every micro-reaction. For hours, Ryan remained there, silent and watchful. He brought treats, small pieces of jerky, offered toys, but never forced, never demanded attention. The dog accepted the gestures on its own terms, testing, evaluating, assessing the sincerity behind each motion. Ryan learned to read the subtle signs, the flick of an ear, the shift of weight, the softening of eye. He began to mirror the patience the dog required, realizing that trust was reciprocal. It could only grow when nurtured with humility and respect. During breaks, He observed from across the room as the dog interacted with other officers. He noticed the subtle differences in tone, approach, and body language. The German Shepherd responded differently to each person, some with complete obedience, others with polite caution. Ryan reflected on his own mistakes, realizing that yesterday's spill was not just a coffee mishap. It was a moment where he had failed to understand presence, attention, and the silent dialogue that existed between human and dog. Now he could begin to rebuild it. Weeks passed in this careful, deliberate rhythm. Mornings began with quiet observation, afternoons with gentle interaction, evenings with walks around the precinct yard. Ryan started to anticipate the dog's responses, learning its subtle cues, when it wanted distance, when it sought engagement, when it was on alert. Each small acknowledgement, a relaxed ear, a soft nudge, a tail flick, felt like a victory, a whisper of connection that Ryan cherished in a way he had not anticipated. The bond was fragile, yes, but it existed, and each day reinforced it. The commander noticed quietly, observing the shifts in dynamic without interference. He would occasionally speak, offering a brief, precise instruction, a nod of approval, or a pointed question that challenged Ryan's understanding of the dog and himself. These moments were tense, a reminder that every action mattered, that every misstep had consequences. But Ryan had begun to understand that mistakes were part of growth, provided they were met with reflection, accountability, and genuine effort. The spilled coffee was no longer a shameful memory. It was a marker of the starting point from which trust would be built. One afternoon, the air heavy with the scent of rain and wet asphalt from outside, Ryan sat quietly on the edge of the training yard, watching the German Shepherd patrol a short perimeter. The dog's movements were precise, confident, and yet restrained, every inch a testament to years of discipline and training. Ryan felt a surge of admiration and humility, realizing that earning trust was not about dominance, but about alignment, attunement, and respect. He reached out slowly, and this time, the dog approached of its own accord, nose brushing his hand, eyes meeting his in a moment of recognition. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to Ryan, it was monumental. The bond continued to grow through small, cinematic rituals, shared walks at dawn, soft commands spoken in a calm tone, gentle touches that conveyed assurance rather than control. Ryan learned to speak the language of body and presence, matching the dog's energy without overwhelming it. The commander occasionally joined, silently observing, and Ryan could feel the unspoken evaluation in every step, every glance. It was exacting, demanding, and yet fair, a reminder that trust, once broken, required immense effort to rebuild, and that maintaining it demanded consistency, patience, and humility. The dog began to respond to Ryan's calls, not out of obedience alone, but out of acknowledgement. It would tilt its head, consider his gestures, and then act, a quiet affirmation that the rookie was learning, adapting, and beginning to understand the rhythm of their shared world. Ryan felt pride, yes, but more importantly, he felt a deep sense of responsibility. This bond was fragile, yes, but it was real. And with it came the weight of accountability, the knowledge that trust, once given, must be honored in every action. By the end of the month, a subtle shift had occurred. The German Shepherd no longer flinched at Ryan's approach. It allowed proximity, engagement, and occasional playful nudges that felt like gestures of approval. The commander nodded once, just slightly, in recognition of Ryan's growth, a brief but meaningful acknowledgement. Ryan understood that the journey was far from over, that mistakes would still happen, that trust could be fragile and fleeting, but for the first time, he had proof that patience, consistency, and humility could bridge the gap between error and connection. The sky outside darkened with the promise of evening storms, the faint smell of rain mingling with the earthy scent of the yard. Ryan knelt beside the dog, hand resting lightly on its back, feeling the steady rhythm of its breathing. The moment was quiet, almost sacred. He realized that this fragile bond was more than a professional requirement. It was a lesson in empathy, discipline, and human imperfection. It was proof that even in the face of fear, mistakes, and judgment, connection could be forged. And as the first raindrops fell, dotting the ground in soft, irregular patterns, Ryan allowed himself a small smile, quiet but genuine. A dog shifted slightly, nose nudging his hand, and he understood fully that trust once earned could blossom into something remarkable. The journey was far from over, but the fragile bond had taken root, delicate yet enduring, a testament to patience, humility, and the quiet courage of showing up day after day, ready to earn respect not through words, but through action. The storm had been building all morning, a low, constant drum of clouds and wind pressing against the city. Rain fell in thick sheets, drumming relentlessly on the patrol car's roof, as Rookie Officer Ryan gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. The radio crackled with a call, suspect fleeing, dangerous armed, and adrenaline replaced the familiar tremor of nerves with sharp, precise focus. Beside him, the German Shepherd sat alert, ears pricked, muscles coiled like springs, eyes scanning the rain-soaked streets as if already reading the scene ahead. Ryan felt the bond they had been building crystallize in the tension of the moment. This was not practice. This was trust in motion, a real test of everything they had learned together. The precinct yard blurred past as they raced toward the call. Rain plastered Ryan's hair to his forehead, visibility reduced to streaks of gray, neon reflections bouncing off wet asphalt. His pulse thundered in his ears, matching the dog's low, steady panting beside him. He could feel the animal's energy vibrating through the seat, a coiled intensity waiting to be unleashed. There was no time for hesitation, no room for mistakes. Every instinct, every hour of patient training, every small victory in the kennel was about to face its ultimate trial. The suspect had taken cover in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. Ryan parked the car, heart hammering, and the dog leapt lightly onto the wet pavement, paws splashing in shallow puddles. The smell of rain, wet concrete, and gasoline mingled in the air, acrid and electric. Ryan felt a surge of fear mixed with exhilaration. This was the moment where theory met reality, where mistakes could cost lives, where trust could save them. He whispered a command, barely audible over the storm, and the dog responded instantly, muscles rippling under fur, eyes sharp and unwavering. They moved in tandem, silent and precise, like dancers rehearsing a routine that had finally found its rhythm. The dog led slightly, nose low, scanning every shadow, every movement. Ryan followed, matching step, breathing synchronized, senses heightened to catch the smallest clue. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with dust and tension. Wooden crates cast long, angular shadows in the dim light filtering through broken windows, and every sound, drip of water, scuff of boot, distant hum of the city, amplified in the cavernous space. The dog paused, ears flicking, body tensing. Ryan froze. A faint movement near a stack of crates revealed the suspect, crouched, weapon drawn, eyes wild. Time slowed. Ryan's heart hammered, muscles ready to react, but he knew instinct alone would not win this fight. He trusted the dog just as the dog now trusted him. With a calm but firm voice, he directed it, a go. Find him. The German Shepherd surged forward, fluid and unstoppable, teeth bared, low growl resonating through the warehouse like a ripple of steel. The suspect faltered, startled by the sheer intensity of the presence racing toward him, and Ryan advanced, weapon drawn, aware of the delicate balance between control and chaos. The confrontation was quick but tense. The dog circled the suspect, maintaining just enough distance to dominate without unnecessary aggression. Ryan's voice cut through the storm and the chaos. Drop it. The suspect hesitated, eyes darting between the officer and the dog, the precision of their movements, the unwavering coordination of human and animal. In that moment, Ryan realized the depth of the bond they had forged. Not just obedience, but understanding, trust, and shared purpose. The German Shepherd's eyes flicked to him as if asking permission, waiting for affirmation. Ryan's steady nod was all the signal needed. The suspect dropped the weapon, surrendering to authority amplified by partnership. The adrenaline began to ebb, leaving behind a tremor that coursed through Ryan's limbs. Rain soaked through his uniform, plastered hair to his forehead, but he hardly noticed. The German Shepherd sat obediently beside him, chest heaving, eyes alert but calm, its body language relaxed now that the danger had passed. Ryan knelt, brushing a wet hand over the dog's neck, feeling the rhythm of its heartbeat against his palm. The command was quiet but palpable, almost ceremonial in its intimacy. The dog responded with a gentle nudge, tail flicking once, a subtle acknowledgement, a seal of trust that had been earned through weeks of patience, fear, and growth. When the backup arrived, Ryan felt the weight of the storm settle around him. The city's distant sirens faded into a background hum as the adrenaline subsided, leaving a quiet clarity. He looked at the German Shepherd, chest rising and falling, rain dripping from its fur, eyes shining with focus and respect. The commander arrived moments later, stepping over puddles with the calm authority that had always been so intimidating. It now felt like guidance rather than judgment. He surveyed the scene, nodding once at the dog, once at Ryan, eyes sharp but approving. "Well done," he said, voice low, resonant, carrying more meaning than any ceremony or reward. Ryan felt a surge of emotion he hadn't anticipated. Relief, pride, and an almost overwhelming gratitude. He realized that the spilled coffee, the early humiliation, the countless hours of patient connection had all led to this moment. The bond they had nurtured in quiet corners, over whispered commands and gentle touches, had proven its worth. The dog had chosen him, acknowledged him, and together they had succeeded in a way that words could not fully capture. As the storm continued outside, streaking the city with rain and silver light, Ryan and the German shepherd walked together back to the patrol car. The air smelled of wet asphalt and ozone, the city alive but quiet in the early evening. Ryan felt the dog's presence beside him, solid, attentive, but also protective in a way that no human could replicate. He realized fully that this partnership was not just about law enforcement. It was about trust, respect, and a shared understanding forged through challenge, patience, and vulnerability. Back at the precinct, the dog settled calmly beside Ryan's desk, the commander observing from a distance, a faint approving smile breaking his usual stoicism. Ryan allowed himself to breathe deeply, letting the tension of the day dissolve slowly. He understood that the test had been more than a pursuit or a confrontation. It had been the crucible that defined their partnership. In every glance, every subtle gesture, the bond was affirmed. The German shepherd had trusted him under fire, and he had lived up to that trust. Even as the rain continued to patter against the windows, a sense of quiet triumph settled over Ryan. He knew challenges lay ahead, more mistakes, more tests. But he also knew that he was no longer the same rookie who had spilled coffee in humiliation. He was part of a team now, a fragile but resilient partnership that had been tested under pressure and had emerged stronger. And for the first time, he truly understood the meaning of trust, respect, and the unspoken language that exists between human and dog when the stakes are highest. The storm outside began to soften, light breaking through the clouds in uneven shafts. Ryan patted the German shepherd gently, feeling the steady warmth beneath his fingers. The day had been a trial, a reckoning, and a triumph. And as he watched the dog's ears flick, alert yet calm, Ryan felt a deep, abiding certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together, side by side, bound not by orders, but by trust earned in the crucible of experience. The precinct was quiet now, the storm having passed, leaving the streets glistening with residual rain and the city smelling of wet asphalt and ozone. Morning light streamed through the blinds, thin golden stripes painting the floor in warmth, a stark contrast to the tension that had once filled the room. Rookie Officer Ryan stood near the kennel, watching the German shepherd stretch and settle, ears flicking in the subtle rhythm of calm vigilance. The dog's eyes met his, steady, clear, and unguarded for the first time since the coffee spill. No longer a creature of judgment alone, it had become a companion, a partner, a silent mirror of his growth. Ryan's chest swelled with a mixture of relief and pride. The long weeks of patient effort, cautious gestures, repeated apologies, and small, deliberate acts of respect had culminated in a fragile, undeniable bond. The dog had chosen to trust him, not blindly, but with awareness, assessment, and acknowledgement. The feeling was humbling, almost overwhelming, and yet exhilarating in its simplicity. Connection forged in vulnerability, in consistency, and the courage to endure one's own mistakes. The commander entered, footsteps soft on the linoleum, eyes scanning the scene with the quiet authority that had once terrified Ryan. But now he felt different. He could meet those eyes without flinching, without panic, because the weeks of growth had strengthened him in ways subtle but profound. The commander's gaze softened fractionally, a nod of acknowledgement passing between them. It was not excessive praise, not theatrical affirmation. It was recognition, quiet and meaningful, the kind that carries more weight than words ever could. Ryan knelt beside the German shepherd, hand brushing along the warm, sleek fur. The dog leaned into the touch, eyes half closed in a rare display of comfort, and Ryan felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. He remembered the first day, the spilled coffee, the silent, unblinking stare that had cut straight to the heart of his insecurities. Now, he understood that those moments of discomfort had been necessary. They had been the crucible in which trust, respect, and humility were forged. Each tiny gesture of care and consistency a brick in the bridge between fear and partnership. The precinct hummed quietly with the early morning routine, phones ringing softly, distant boots clattering in hallways, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. But Ryan's focus remained on the dog. He spoke softly, almost to himself, recounting the weeks of slow progress, the hesitant approaches, the careful training exercises, the quiet moments in the kennel when trust was earned inch by inch. Each memory resonated with lessons learned, mistakes confronted, and growth embraced. The dog listened, or perhaps simply existed alongside him, present sufficient without need for comprehension. He thought of the test, the emergency call, the storm-soaked streets, the tense confrontation in the abandoned warehouse. He remembered the adrenaline, the fear, the sharp clarity of instinct guiding them together. That day had been proof, undeniable proof, that the bond was real, that trust could withstand pressure, fear, and chaos. And in that realization, Ryan felt the weight of his journey lift slightly, replaced with a quiet, enduring confidence. He was no longer defined solely by mistakes, but by the resilience and courage to face them, to learn, and to earn redemption through action. The German Shepherd rose gracefully, moving to Ryan's side. It brushed against him lightly, tail flicking once, a gesture small, almost imperceptible, yet heavy with significance. Ryan placed a hand on its head, fingers ruffling fur gently, and felt a connection that transcended words. The bond was complete, not in a single moment of triumph, but in countless small acts of patience, care, and shared understanding. The dog's presence was now a source of strength rather than fear, a silent affirmation that mistakes could be forgiven when met with humility and perseverance. The commander approached, hands clasped behind his back, and Ryan noticed for the first time a faint approving smile touching the corners of his mouth. "You've grown," he said simply, voice steady but warm. There was no lecturing, no exaggeration, only acknowledgement that mattered more than any praise. Ryan felt the words settle over him like a gentle weight, heavy with meaning, resonating with the journey he had endured. He nodded, letting the silence stretch between them, comfortable now, free of tension, filled instead with the quiet acknowledgement of earned trust and achieved growth. Ryan turned his gaze back to the German Shepherd. Its eyes, calm and steady, seemed to convey understanding, respect, and a hint of shared pride. In that moment, he realized that the bond extended beyond the confines of duty. It was personal, profound, and irrevocable. The spilled coffee, the early panic, the weeks of effort, all of it had led to this moment of quiet triumph, a testament to the patience required to nurture trust, the courage to confront mistakes, and the humility to grow from them. The day moved forward with a gentle rhythm. Ryan led the dog outside to patrol the precinct yard, the sun warming wet fur and glinting off droplets that clung to their coats. Each step felt lighter, more confident, as if the weight of earlier mistakes had dissolved in the steady presence of shared understanding. Officers passing by gave quiet nods, a recognition of the journey they had witnessed unfold, silent acknowledgement of growth, resilience, and partnership. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Ryan reflected on the lessons etched into the fabric of his experience. Mistakes were inevitable, fear unavoidable, judgment relentless, but connection, once earned, endured. Trust, patience, humility, and courage were the currencies of relationships, whether human or animal. And in the quiet companionship of the German Shepherd, he had learned them all. The city outside shimmered in the late light, streets wet with rain, distant sirens fading into memory, and a soft wind carried the scent of earth and life. Ryan knelt one last time beside the dog, brushing a hand across its back. The dog leaned in slightly, as if understanding the full scope of their journey, tail flicking in calm acknowledgement. He felt gratitude, not only for the partnership but for the lessons embedded in fear, error, and patience. The spilled coffee had seemed trivial once, and yet it had been the catalyst for transformation. A reminder that even the smallest mistakes could lead to profound growth when met with courage and humility. And as the sun broke fully through the clouds, casting golden light across the precinct, Ryan stood and took a deep breath. The German Shepherd at his side, calm, alert, and unwavering, mirrored his own readiness. They had faced judgment, fear, and chaos, and emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, bonded, and transformed. The journey was ongoing, Challenges ahead inevitable. But in this quiet moment of redemption and resolve, Ryan understood the full meaning of trust, partnership, and the enduring power of patience and care. He glanced at the commander one last time, receiving a nod that needed no words, and together, man and dog stepped forward into the brightening day. Each stride was deliberate, confident, a testament to the trials they had endured, the lessons learned, and the bond that would endure beyond the confines of the precinct, beyond mistakes, and beyond fear. And in that light, in that quiet, steady rhythm of shared presence, Ryan truly knew, that they had earned something unshakable, a connection that would guide them through every challenge yet to come. A bond forged in trial, nurtured in patience, and sealed in the quiet triumph of redemption.